The Netflix that you saw, really, you saw a sign that said Duplin County, and I didn't mention which county. We're actually in Sampson County, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. Sampson County is the second largest hog producing county in the United States. It's the number one turkey producer in the state and maybe third or fourth on the list in the nation of producing turkeys. It has the state's largest landfill, which is about 1,300 acres, and it is the second worst emitter of methane in the United States. It's the worst emitter of vinyl chloride, which is the same thing that happened with the train wreck in Ohio. Yes. It is the worst emitter of vinyl chloride in the state. We have the industry, the pork industry is trying to justify that what they do by now converting that hog waste into renewable natural gas. So I, for one, have gotten my letter from my gas supplier saying that I probably have a mix of that in the gas coming into my home. And they've been able to sell it at a federal level as something that's good. And it's actually not, because of the way they produce it. It creates more problems than just the hog waste in those communities. But the federal government is subsidizing it. So we have real concerns about that. We have an Enviva wood pellet factory here. And I don't know if you know anything about Enviva. No. But there are 4 counties in North Carolina that have these wood pellet companies. And they're the ones who make the wood pellets. They deforest our lands and send the wood pellets over to the UK so that they can claim carbon neutrality. And that's creating pollution in the communities where that wood pellet factory is. In the middle of town here, we've got a Smithfield processing plant. So they bring the hogs into town and process them here in town. And the factory here is not the largest one, but this one here has the capacity to process 10,000 hogs a day. The largest producer is about 35 miles from here, and they have the capacity to process up to 32,000 hogs a day. So that's how huge the meat consumption is here. Did I miss anything about Sampson County? We now are in the process of testing. Well, our organization has been doing free water testing for folks who have residential wells, because about 50% of the population is on well water because there's not a county infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And we have been finding all kinds of bad things in the water, but right now the alarm is around PFAS. I guess are you familiar with that?
No, trust me. Okay. I don't think I know anything. Everything is shocking to me right now.
PFOS, write this down, PFOS and PFOA. Mm-hmm. Are compounds that were originally created by DuPont in Delaware. Mm-hmm. It is a component of Teflon pans. It's used on the wrappers that you get from Burger King and places. That's the sticky stuff that keeps mm-hmm. it from sticking. It's known as a forever chemical. If it ever gets in your system, it doesn't degrade. It's there for the rest of your life. So we're finding it all over the county now. Mm-hmm. Cleanup from the Cape Fear River, which is our river basin. The cleanup from the river basin came to the landfill here. Mm-hmm. So we have folks around the landfill that are being tested for the presence of that compound, but it's in other places around the county as well. It's in the water. It's not the plastic that everybody is concerned about. The microplastics that everybody's talking about is in water now. This is different from those microplastics. So there are, I think people used to think I was exaggerating when I talked about all the issues in Sampson County and why I was so passionate about trying to get people here to see what was here. We actually created something that we call a toxic tour. We actually take people on a tour around the county, and they can actually each stop. We have community members to come out and talk to them about their lived experience where they live and how they're impacted by what's around them.
You know, when I watched this Netflix special that you were on, I feel like I saw that lady before on another set, like a documentary.
There is a documentary called The Smell of Money. Have you seen that?
No.
Okay. It's on Netflix, Prime, Apple. Is streaming now, but it's also it just ended up, it's in movie theaters since last October. But it tells the story of the impact, not just the impact of hog farms, but the story of one of my personal friends who actually passed away in her fight to keep Smithfield from stealing their family property, which had been in their property since slavery or shortly after slavery.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I want to hear about, you have so many stories. And it's the wealth of information. You had to open up this whole can. I want to hear, and I know you don't have time, but tell me about that aspect of sort of the fight for Black people in this space, our health, our land, and legacy. That's very, very interesting to me.
Well, the county I come from is a very rural county. I grew up here. My mother grew up here. Her parents grew up here. So my family has been in this area since we can at least trace our family back to the mid 1800s. Because my grandfather was born in 1889. So his father was born, I don't remember the exact date, but somewhere before 1850. So the family has been in this area for a long time. Black land is problematic because too often, because of where we live, there are not a lot of opportunities. So when young folks graduate high school and go get college degrees, the last place they're going to come back is here. And oftentimes when there's an opportunity to sell property, they will sell property, or they lose property because of not paying taxes for whatever reason on property. So Black land loss has been, an issue for a very, very, very long time. And if it isn't lost that way, then there have been situations where somehow, deeds were not recorded properly at the courthouse, or somehow they got lost. Heirs property is another problem because, we generationally have passed land down oftentimes by word of mouth. Fortunately, our family has deeds, but even on those deeds, the borders are a creek, a tree, and things like that, which move or rot or whatever. So over time, there can be real disagreements about where property lines are. So land loss is an issue. We hope that over time, folks will understand that we aren't making any more land.
No.
And if we're selling it off, then we are losing generational wealth over time. Yes, you may be living in a better situation in a city or something, but to sell it off and not think about what's going to be put on that land when you sell it.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes it has been, and let me say that there's been a moratorium on putting any more hog farms in for over 20 years. Okay. So they can't put any more in. But the fact that folks may have sold their property to folks that were putting in these facilities years and years and years ago have impacted the communities, because within a 3-mile radius of most of these facilities are Black, brown, indigenous, and maybe poor white folks. And I can send you some statistics later. I just can never remember all of the statistics off the top of my head. So when I moved back home, I knew that the landfill was a problem. And I have a good friend that I grew up with who lives out in that area. So I gave them a call once we formed EJ Can, which is the nonprofit that I co-founded here. We co-founded it in July 2020. We started meeting with community, trying to identify, some of the issues. And one of the first things folks talked about was the quality of the water. So we partnered with 2 academic institutions, with Appalachian State University first, and then UNC Chapel Hill, to start doing water testing. So we do water testing for residents free of charge. If they had to pay for it, it would cost at a minimum $75 for a water test. And many residents down here couldn't afford to pay even $75 to have water tested. So we hope that we're providing that service. And now we have funding that just this past Christmas, or around Christmas, it wasn't exactly Christmas, we were able to buy filtration water pitchers for the homes that we had identified that had problems, recognizing that that's just a temporary fix. They need much more than that. But at least if they filter their water, they can know they've got safe drinking water and safe water to cook with. We just got the state of North Carolina reached out to our organization to ask if we would partner with them on an EPA grant. It's called the Government to Government Grant. We just got funding for that grant. It will be for a period of 3 years. And we will be able to, of course, we don't get all the money. The money goes to the state and then we're sub-awardee, but it's a grant for a total of $1 million for 3 years. And we'll be able to test at least 300 homes each year. So we'll be able to expand the testing that we're currently doing, and we'll have funding to mitigate 175 homes a year if necessary. So putting in water treatment systems, or, depending on what the requirement is, in some way be able to assist folks more than just handing them a water pitcher and say, hope everything is going to be going okay.
What are the kinds of things that make people say, hey, can you come and check my water?
Well, now that folks in the county are beginning to realize what's in their water. I mean, folks have known that their water wasn't safe to some extent because, folks have complained about the smell of the water or the discoloration of the water. So they know that there's either something in it that's causing it to discolor, and discoloring appliances like, in the bathroom toilets, have brown rings from, where the water sits, or cooking pans over time will turn color because of the water. Or it sits for a while and you'll see a slight skim of what looks like some type of oily skim on top of the water. Or it's the smell. I mean, some homes you can go into and as soon as you walk in the house, you can smell the odor emanating from the water. So there are ways that people have known that there was a problem. I don't think there's ever been any real concerted effort to identify what those problems were. So some of the testing that we've done has been able to detect arsenic, lead, nitrates, hydrogen sulfide. I'm trying to think of some of the other components, but a number of different things, the PFOA and PFOS that I was just telling you about. And that has over 900 different compounds of that Teflon no stick component. So in some cases, if you don't find those two, if you find other forms of it, those can be precursors to becoming, the two major ones that folks tend to talk about more than others.
Tell me this. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I could listen to you all day, and I'm so serious and sincere about this. When I went to school, I did law, but I didn't do environmental law. And
I didn't do environmental law. I guess I knew innately that something was going on before I went to college because I lived on a street that the garbage dump used to be at the end of. And every house along the street where I lived, although I would say folks considered it a better off community because the doctor, the dentist, teachers, kind of lived in that area. Of course, there was a housing project, a Depression era housing project right across from my house. But, folks kind of saw that part of town as a little bit better off. But I could look at each house and could point to each house, and in each house, there was someone in that house that had cancer. So I knew that there, innately not knowing anything about it. And at a later point in my career, I ended up doing two things that really made me more aware. I worked for the American Cancer Society when they were in the process of trying to convince the Congress to give FDA the authority to regulate tobacco. And I went into that work as someone who grew up working in tobacco. That was my summer job. And I was a smoker, or had been a smoker. So, and then they wanted to build a relationship with tobacco farmers. So it was, I began to really sort of take a deep dive into some of the things that I'd been exposed to all of my life and not really thought about it because, those smoking was acceptable, all the things that we were doing back then were acceptable. And then later on in my career, I ended up at EPA.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
And finally in the Office of Environmental Justice at EPA. And when I was there, it was my responsibility as a part of my job to get feds out into communities just like mine so that they could understand the problems on the ground rather than just sitting behind a desk somewhere and making a decision on somebody's grant application or destiny or concern that they had without having any real sense of what community members might actually be experiencing on the ground.
So you've been doing toxic tours for a long time.
Yeah, I started doing those when I was at EPA. And we started here doing them just in cars. And then we had a funder who heard about what we were doing and said, sounds like you need a van to do that work in. So we were fortunate enough to get funding. So we now have a 15-passenger van that we can, actually use to do that work. Fortunately, EPA came for a visit back in November, I guess it was. And even they were surprised at what they saw.
Are you kidding me?
Again, seeing it is very different than seeing a picture when you can smell the odor from the landfill and see the buzzards flying over and folks are standing there telling you, well, this really isn't a bad day today. And you're standing there thinking, oh my God, I can't stand this odor.
What does it smell like?
People think it's methane, but methane is odorless. It smells like rotting garbage and hydrogen sulfide. So it smells like rotten eggs. It sort of smells like it used to smell going into New Jersey.
Yes. Okay.
So it smells kind of like that. And the landfill is permitted to receive anything from household waste to treated contaminated products. And I'll send you some stories from here. You can Google my name or the organization name and pull up a lot of stuff, but I'll send you some stories. We were able to stop some contaminated soil from coming here to this landfill last year. But we're on the list to get some more stuff from that same site that I found out this week. So I'm going to have to do some phone calls now to stop that.
Can I ask you this? How did Sampson County become this magnet for all of this waste? And how do people protect themselves from this kind of stuff?
Well, that's the problem with environmental injustice. Generally, these kinds of things end up in communities that have the least power. If you don't have elected officials advocating for you at the county level or at the state, at the local or the county or the state level, then there's not a lot you can do. This community tried to fight the placement of the landfill in their community. And it, the county commissioners decided that that's where it was going to go, and that's where it ended up. And, over time, it's become this behemoth, basically. The state has 100 counties, and this landfill gets trash from 44 of those 100 counties. And we're in the process now of trying to identify all of the counties because the story hasn't been told. That's part of the problem. I've been talking with reporters since 2020 about all kinds of stuff, and nothing ever seems to make it to a national level so that folks understand that environmental injustice is a real issue, not just in cities, but in rural areas like where we come from. And even decision makers, I think, have a problem with conceiving or understanding that just because we're rural, that it doesn't mean that we get dumped on all the time. And with EJ communities, once you get one or two things there, then it's kind of like you become a magnet for everything else.
Yes. And I know that this time frame, and I really wanted to ask you about this case, which I really don't understand.
Okay.
On one side, we've got a political climate that does not understand or disregards the life and health of people. On the other side, you've got people who live there, maybe on generational land, historically. This is, for whatever reason, I'm here. And this is not something, oh, if you just eat right, diet and exercise helps take the PFAS out of your water. So help me address both of those.
It's difficult, and I'll give you the example of one of the residents who lives out by the landfill, and that's been his, it's been in his family. They can trace theirs back to slavery. And he has held onto the land. His children have grown up, graduated, got degrees, moved other places. And they told him, Dad, we're never going to come back here. There's nothing to come back to. All we're going to do is end up out here in this place where we're going to smell and look out at this garbage pit every time we, leave the house. And while they aren't coming back, the residents are suffering because while obviously their property values are no longer what they would be if they were someplace else without a landfill, they're still paying the same rate of taxes as everybody else. They don't get a break for anything. So here you are being killed by what you're being exposed to from everything that's coming out of the landfill. And the gentleman that I was referring to told me that he now, when he walks from his house to a neighbor's house across the field, he takes his gun with him because they've seen black bears now, because the landfill is attracting all kinds of animals. And this used to be a vibrant community. They used to have, had barbershop, store, and then they widened the highway and broke the community up that much more, went from a 2-lane to a 4-lane. So the road that used to go through the community where the shops and stuff were got dead end, for this other, highway. So all of the injustices that they talk about that happen in cities to create ghettos and off ramps, for highways and that kind of stuff, is happening right here. The landfill takes 250 trucks a day.
Wow.
So it's not just the landfill itself, is the noise from the trucks, is the emissions from the trucks, is the increased traffic. The state just permitted a new facility to go out there, so they're now going to capture the methane from out there and turn it into liquid natural gas and truck it to some place where they can infuse it into a pipeline. And so they are justifying all kinds of ways to keep stuff here and claiming that they are cutting methane emissions and reducing climate change with all this other stuff that they're putting out there that's creating more pollution, in the middle of the community. So it's hard to explain, to folks who don't live here when the industry says, oh, we're creating renewable natural gas and we're helping to reduce climate change. They don't understand that, the industry can advertise and sell you a bill of goods, and the community doesn't have any way to counter
that. Okay. And yeah, and I'm hearing you on all of this. And what I'm surprised by, I guess, having not known you, is that, this is way more than just those nasty hog farms.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's just, like you said, it's become a magnet. What would you want to see people in our community do to support? You said this hasn't gotten national traction. What would you like to see people do?
Well, I tell people locally, and when I go to meetings within state and people ask, well, what would you like for us to do? I say, number one, think about what you're disposing of and where it's going. Start doing sustainable stuff. I'm a member of a sorority. I walked into a sorority meeting and they had styrofoam cups and plates and stuff. And I said, I know y'all ain't doing this. And this stuff is going to that landfill and it doesn't decompose when it gets out there.
Yeah.
So little steps, I know folks can't just take big, broad steps to do things, but little steps could help. But I think people need to start digging a little bit deeper and learning more about communities. Environmental justice is the buzzword, but what do you really know about environmental justice? Who is it really impacting? Do you have relatives in Alabama or South Carolina or somewhere that may be getting this crap dumped on them, and you aren't at least trying to raise the awareness, whether from inside or outside, or do they have an organization that you could make a contribution to if they're trying to do some work in that area? Do you have some time you can go and volunteer? Do you have some time? Do you know how to do social media? Can you, put something on social media to bring attention to what's going on? There are just so many different ways that things can happen. And, one of the big problems with communities like this is it's hard to find people to hire.
Yes.
Because of the way the industry has worked. And North Carolina, like a lot of other states, is a right to work state. So if you work for Smithfield, which is the pork processing plant, and it's generational. I mean, it was something else before it was Smithfield. Folks can be skeptical of even wanting to associate with you for fear that they might lose a job or a family member might lose a job. We started trying to work with some of the ministers locally, and we have a couple of ministers that we work with, and one of them said to me that they had tried to talk with some of their fellow members of the clergy, and the reaction was, I don't know if I want to work with them. They may make people lose jobs. So it's that kind of mentality. It's generational, and we know it's going to take a long time for some people to be comfortable even talking about or engaging, with us around some of these issues. We are partnering with a statewide nonprofit now to put air monitors out around the county, because there's never been air monitoring in this county. So people don't really know what they're being exposed to, not from a trusted place. So we're working with that organization to do this project, and we will be putting all of that information up on a data dashboard that they're creating so folks can go and see real time what's happening, in their communities. Over time.
Let me ask you right there. That's a good place. One, can we give to your organization? And two, where would you like us to go? Is there a website? Would you like us to follow?
Yes, our website is www.ejcan.org. That's for Environmental Justice Community Action Network.
I love it.
And there's a donate button on there. There's also a place if folks want more information. There's a link to info@ejcan.org. We check that on a regular basis and respond to that as well.
I love how you are sitting there, the picture you're sitting there in front of the blinds and you've got a halo around.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you see it. It's, to me, I'm like, this says something. Are you a believer? Are you a religious person?
I am. I actually, are you familiar with Reverend William Barber, who does the Poor People's Campaign?
Yeah.
I'm a member of his church now. I've known Barber since he graduated from college. We go back a long ways, but I was a member of a Baptist church here in town, but I was gone. I lived in DC and Maryland, when I was working at EPA and doing my stuff up there. So when I moved back home, I wanted to get involved with a church that I felt like was doing something in the community. And I ended up, at Barber's church after kind of coming back to the churches, that I had gone to as a child. So I'm a member of that church. He stepped down as pastor, but we have a dynamic woman who is now the pastor of the church, but that's the church I'm a member of.
You are a dynamic woman. I am so happy and proud. I don't even know you. I don't have the right to say I'm proud of you, but my heart is like, yes.
Well, let's keep the conversation going. I'm more than happy to talk with you. Do you know when you're coming down now? Are you still coming this weekend?
I don't know if I'm going to come down this weekend. Unfortunately, you know how you got family situations. Family members sick, so I might not be able to come. But if I do get down there, I'm going to look you up.
It's about a 4.5 hour drive. I do it. I used to do it all the time. And we have a nice hotel in town. If you want to come, we'd be more than happy to entertain you. And give you the tour and let you go out and meet some of the folks, and you could write a bigger story if you wanted to.
Well, I'm gonna work on this. This is going to be a good story. I'm sorry. You are the cover. You're the cover woman at this point, because I love this story and I love the work that you're doing. And I'm gonna let you go in time for your meeting. But I maybe going through your website and maybe, try to.
And I'll tell you right now, our website is not what it should be because none of us old folks know how to do that. And we're working with another partner who has offered to take care of the funding for someone to do our social media stuff. We had an intern this past summer and she was amazing. And, she was first year college student. So anything we needed done, we looked like we were just all over the place with Instagram and YouTube, just everything. But we don't have that capacity yet. And we're really working on trying to get some of the capacity that we know that, we need to be able to tell the story.
All right. Well, maybe that somebody else is going to watch this and they're going to say, I can help like that. Anyway,
that would be amazing as well.
God bless you in your work, you and yours.
Well, it's such a pleasure to meet you, and I look forward to talking to you again at some point in time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.